Hilchos Shabbos, Perek Shiv'a ve'Esrim. The Laws of Shabbos, chapter 27. Finally, we've completed the discussion on the Lamitet Melachot, the 39 primary categories of labor that are forbidden on the Shabbos. The Rambam spent many chapters detailing what goes under the umbrella of each melacha. Then we got into Shvut, all the rabbinic injunctions that were added because they resemble or they could lead to melacha. Then we dealt with Muktzah, the idea that the sages said that not everything that could be moved should be moved on the Shabbos. There are certain things we should avoid moving and touching on the Shabbos. And today, the Rambam shifts gears to another mitzvah that's associated with Shabbos. Way in the beginning of these laws, the Rambam told us that in the 30 chapters of the laws of Shabbat, we're going to be discussing 5 mitzvahs. We've done already 3 of them, which is the positive commandment to rest, the negative commandment not to do any work, and the negative commandment on the high court not to punish anybody on the Shabbos. And then today, we're going to be dealing with, today and tomorrow essentially, we're going to be dealing with another mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of Techum Shabbat, the border of Shabbos. Every city has a certain limit outside of which a person is allowed to walk on Shabbos, and past that, we may not. That's going to be the subject of today's and tomorrow's chapter, and then in chapter 29, we're going to deal with the final mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of Kiddush, and some say Havdalah is included as well, the idea of sanctifying the Shabbos through verbally mentioning it when it comes in and when it comes out. But today, we're focused on, as I said before, the mitzvah of Techum Shabbat, the border relating to cities on Shabbos. Says the Rambam, Halacha Aleph, Hayotzei Chutz Litchum HaMedina B'Shabbat. One who walks past the border of a given city on Shabbos, Lokeh, gets lashes. Shene'emar, as it says in the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu said, when the Jewish people were in the desert, they asked him, should we collect man on Shabbat? The man, according to the Midrash and according to many opinions, would come into the camp of the Jewish people. But definitely there were some people who had to go outside of the camp of the Jewish people to collect their man that fell from heaven. So when it came Friday, the Jewish people got a double portion, and they didn't know why. They went to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, Hashem gave you bread today for 2 days, because tomorrow is the Shabbos, and on Shabbos we have a rule, Al yetzei ish mimkomo bayom hashvi'i. A person should not leave his place on the 7th day. Now what does that mean? You sit in your chair the whole 24 hours of Shabbos? No. The sages said, Makom zeh hu tchum ha'ir. When the Torah uses the word place, it means do not leave the border of your city. In the case of the Jewish people in the desert, as we're going to see in a moment, that's the Jewish camp, where they were camped in the desert. Now, the Torah doesn't say how far out is considered to be the border of the city. But our sages have copied down tradition. The border is to walk outside the area of 12 mil. A mil is approximately a kilometer, so let's call it 12 kilometers. Keneged Machanei Yisrael. Why was this amount chosen? Because that was the size of the Jewish camp in the desert. They camped in a square, according to the accepted opinion, and the square was 12 by 12 mil. So when a person is standing on Shabbos in a city, he should not walk out of the city that length, 12 kilometers outside of the city. Essentially, that was what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Jewish people. Lo teitzu chutz lamachaneh. On Shabbos, do not leave the camp. A person should not leave his place. Do not leave the 12 by 12 mil space which we occupy in the desert. Don't go outside the camp. And forevermore, any Jew living in any city should not walk that distance outside of his city. Now, that's quite far. Umidivrei Sofrim, rabbinically, they added a stringency here. Shelo yetzei adam chutz la'ir ela ad alpayim amah. The 12 mil is too long. A person shouldn't even leave 2,000 cubits, 2,000 amot, which is approximately 3,000 feet, outside of a city's borders. Aval chutz la'alpayim amah asur. Outside 2,000 cubits is forbidden. Shalpayim amah hu migrash ha'ir. Why did they use this amount? Because in the Torah, 2,000 cubits is considered to be the pasture area that extends beyond the city. In Parshat Mas'eh, the end of the 4th book of the Torah, Hashem tells the Jewish people that the tribe of Levi is not going to get any portion in the land of Israel. Instead, they're going to get cities, 48 cities, among where the Jewish people were living. 48 cities spread out all across Israel. And the way it used to work was that the cities had to come with, number one, an area to dwell in, and then 2,000 amot outside of the city's limits so that people can plant there and their animals can pasture there. It's called migrash in the Torah. So the sages said, you see when it comes to the tribe of Levi, that the extension of the city is considered to be only until 2,000 amot. So when it comes to Shabbos, also we're going to be a little more stringent and say that a person cannot leave 2,000 amot past the city. That's already called going out of the border. Halacha bet, nimsein talamed. It turns out that you learn from what we just said before. It comes out the following: shemutar la'adam b'Shabbat lahalech et kol ha'ir kula. The whole idea of the Techum is walking a certain distance outside the city. But whatever city you find yourself in, you can walk around the entire city. Afilu hayta kin Ninveh, even if it was as big as Ninveh, which was considered to be a very big city. Ben shehayta mukefet choma, ben shelo hayta mukefet choma, whether or not it had a wall. V'chein, and then also mutar lo lahalech chutz la'ir al payim ama lechol ruach. You can walk outside of the city 2,000 amot in every direction. Now, for clarity and simplicity's purposes, we're going to assume that your average city is square. So you have a square city. Now, how do you measure 2,000 amot to each direction? If you think about it, if you go 2,000 amot this way and 2,000 amot that way, then if you draw a square that encompasses the 2,000 amot, the diagonal from the edge of the city is much more than 2,000 amot. It's actually 2,800 amot. That would prompt a person to think, perhaps we should draw a circle around the city. In other words, we should make it 2,000 amot evenly from whatever point of the city you leave. Says the Rambam, no. Though these 2,000 amot that we give you, we're a little generous with them. Merubaot. We give them to you as if they were a square. Kitavla merubat. As though it's a square or rectangular, the point is four-cornered tablet extending out of the city. Kadeshi yaniskar et hazaviot. So you gain the corners. In other words, the rabbis understood that, when we say 2,000 amot from each direction, essentially what we're saying is that if you're going straight out of the side of the city, you'll only have 2,000 amot. But if you leave the city on a diagonal, you're going to end up with 2,800 amot, roughly. That's the difference between the two diameters. And that's fine. That's how the sages intended it. That we stretch out from the square city, so to speak, a square of 2,000 amot, which equals, in the corners, a little bit more. By the way, it's kind of reminiscent of what we had earlier in chapter 12 about the 4 amot that a person can traverse in the public domain. Over there also, we took into account the diagonal. The Rambam said we can't hold you biblically liable until you walk 5 3/5 amot, because that's the diagonal of a 4 by 4 amot square. So here also we see the idea of including the diagonal. If a person does leave the area of 2,000 amot outside the city, makinoto makat mardut. The sages can take matters into their own hands and give you what's called rabbinic lashes. Can't hold you biblically liable because you didn't transgress anything biblical, but you transgress something rabbinic, so we give you the rabbinic lashes. Ad shnei masar mil. That's till you walk past 12 kilometers approximately. Aval im yatzav yirchik min ha'ir yater al shnei masar mil. But if you went ahead and walked past the city's limits, the biblical city limits, 12 mil outside the city, afilu amma achat, even if you went just 1 amma, 18 inches, 1.5 feet over the border, lokem min Torah. Now you can be held liable and get lashes biblically. Halacha gimel. Hamahalech chutz latchum lemala me'asara tefachim. You took a walk outside the city's limits, but you were constantly at a height higher than 10 tefachim from the ground. It's pretty significant because we remember from earlier chapters that when it comes to defining what a public domain is, the airspace of a public domain only goes until 10 tefachim tall. Once you're above 10 tefachim, you're in what's called makom ptur, a place of exemption. So perhaps, if my walk takes place over the height of 10 tefachim, as the Rambam says, al gabei amudim shegvohin asara. For example, I jumped from pillar to pillar, from pole to pole, each one 10 tefachim tall, ve'ein bechol echad mehen arba'a tefachim, and none of them have a surface area of 4 by 4 tefachim. We'll soon see that makes a difference, but for now, the case where you don't have 4 by 4 tefachim, so now have you transgressed this avera? Harei zeh safek. There's a doubt. Im yesh tchumin lemala me'asara, or in tchumin lemala me'asara. Is the idea of a city's limits existent above 10 tefachim or not? Or is it only when you're walking on surface ground level of lower than 10 tefachim? However, regardless, aval im halach al makom sheyesh bo arba'a al arba'a, if the place where you're walking, even above 10 tefachim, has a surface area of 4 by 4 tefachim, harei zeh kim halech al haaretz, then you're considered like walking on the ground. There's no doubt. V'yesh yisur tchumin sham, and certainly the prohibition of crossing the border exists over there. And now the Rambam discusses the number of cases where you may end up outside of the Techum, outside of the border, and how you can or cannot re-enter the Techum. Halacha Dalet. Misha Shabbat b'dir shebamidbar. A person accepts the Shabbos, he's spending Shabbos in a little enclosed pen in the desert. There's no city. O b'sahar, o b'ma'ara, in a cave, or in a coral, some kind of corral, I don't know how you pronounce it, some kind of enclosed area. Point is, you're not in a city. Something like that. It's a private domain. You aren't in a city. Do you also have the idea of a border? So that the same rules apply. You can traverse the entire area of that enclosed domain. And outside of it, you can also go the 2,000 amot in a square, as we said, to every direction. The same thing as if you're spending Shabbos in an open plain. There is no enclosure. Even if you were sleeping in the moment when Shabbos came in, in which case you didn't legally accept your resting place to be here, nevertheless, since Shabbos came in when you were in this plane, you can walk from wherever it is that you are, 2,000 amot in a square. Let's say you're walking in a plane and it's Shabbos, you don't know where the border is. Take 12 average steps, and that's where your border stops, because it's about a step per amma. Of course, if you take a wide step, then it's a little bit more, but the point is 2,000 average steps, that's where we're going to approximate that the Techum Shabbat is. You're in a city, you leave your city, you start walking. You take up the full 2,000 amot. And the 2,000 amot end up within another enclosed area. And the 2,000 amot conclude in a pen, or in a corral, or in a cave, or in another city. Here you don't have permission to go the whole city now, or the whole enclosed area. You can only go till the end of your measurement. We don't say, since your measurement finished within a private domain, you can continue walking the entire length of that private domain. We don't say that. When do we say the above? If the 2,000 amot finished inside the city, or inside the cave. But if the entire length of the enclosed area was part of the 2,000 amot, in other words, the 2,000 amot, if you would count them strictly from the edge of your city till wherever you're going, would include the entire length of the city, then then actually a leniency is granted. The entire private domain which you encounter on your walk becomes converted into just 4 amot, umashlimin lo et hashar, and you can continue walking till you finish 2,000 past that city or past that private domain. As the Rambam describes it right now. Halacha vav ketzad. What does that look like? Harei shehaya 1,000 amma mimkom shvitato o michutz la'ir ad medina o me'ara. Let's say there's 1,000 amma of distance from wherever you accepted the Shabbos or from outside of your city till the next city or till the next cave. Sheyesh be'orka 1,000 amma o pachot me'elef. And that next city or that next cave is a distance of 1,000 amot or less, such that technically, had you just walked your 2,000 strict amot, you would end up past the city or past the cave. Now, you can walk the entire distance of the city or the cave which you met, and you can continue walking another 1,000 amot minus 4. In other words, another 996 amot, because we consider the entire cave to be, or entire city to become just 4 amot. But if that city or that cave which you encountered in your 2,000 amma original walk is 1,000 amma ve'ama, has just 1,001 amot, such that your 2,000 amot, had you counted them strictly, would still end within the border of the cave or the second city. You can only walk the 1,000, i.e. to finish the 2,000 which you began with, but nothing more. You can't walk past. Okay, somebody who does have to stop his measurement in the middle of a city. Even though, walking-wise, he can only walk indeed until where his measurement finishes. He could nevertheless carry, technically, move objects around in the rest of the city by throwing stuff. He can't walk, but he can throw stuff there. It's not a problem. Same thing would apply if somebody spends Shabbos in an open plain. And he finds himself, he wakes up in the morning, Goyim have established an enclosed area around him. They've made his area into a private domain. He can only walk 2,000 amot in every direction from wherever he is, even though technically he's inside our partition, and usually the law would be that you could walk to the edge of the partition and from there another 2,000 amot. But here, since Shabbos came in and you were alone without the partition, you can only walk 2,000 amot. But because you have a partition, anything within the partition, you can move stuff around through throwing. Of course, if they put up the partition, the goyim, for living purposes. If it wasn't for living purposes, then we saw earlier in chapter 16, there's a whole different set of laws there. It's considered like a public domain. Halachatet, some other variations about the Techum. A person is traveling, he's on his way into the city. Whether he's traveling by sea or by dry land. If he entered the Techum of that city, in other words, he came within 2,000 amot of the city he's trying to get to, even though he only reaches the actual city on Shabbos, he can go in and he's treated as though he started off Shabbos in the city. And he can walk the entire distance of the city, plus the 2,000 amot outside of it. In other words, you would think, since he started Shabbos, let's say 1,500 amot outside the city, he should only be able to walk those 1,500 plus 500 in the city. No, because he was traveling to the city and he was trying to get there, and he got to within the 2,000 before Shabbos started, he's considered to have started Shabbos in the city. It's actually a story in the Talmud that actually happened like this. There was a bunch of sages on a ship, and they were traveling to a city, and when it came Shabbos, they didn't know if they can go into the city or not. And Rabbi Gamliel said, no, I saw that we were already within the Techum, so we can go inside. And from there, the Talmud learns this halacha. Halacha Yut. Haya balam dina v'yashen baderech. A person was traveling to a city, he fell asleep on the road, v'lo ne'or ela b'shabbat. And he only woke up when it was Shabbos already, Friday night, let's say. Ukeshen ne'or matzah atzmo b'toch ha'tchum. And here too, when he wakes up, he finds that he's within 2,000 amot of the city. Same thing, you can go into the city, and be treated as though you started Shabbos in the city, walk the entire distance of the city, as well as 2,000 amot in every direction outside of the city. What is the reason for this? Because in both cases, you wanted to get to the city. So you acquired your state of rest. Your Shabbos begins in that city, together with the other members of the city, because you're already within their border as well, so we treat you as if you're actually in the city. Halacha Yud Aleph. A person starts Shabbos in the city. And then he exits the Techum. He leaves the border. Afilu ama achat, even if it's one ama, lo yikanes, you cannot go in. Now, this is a bit puzzling and has to be explained, as Rambam will explain it momentarily. We've been seeing till now that so long as you're within the space of a city, you can be counted as though you're within the city. Now consider this. Every person, no matter where he is on the Shabbos, has an area of 4 amot square that he can carry. Remember from the laws of carrying? A person has a square around them of 4 amot. So, if you leave the border of the city, I get it. If you pass 10 amot, 15 amot, okay, you're way out. Even if you go back your 4 amot which you have, you won't be back inside the 2,000 square amot of the city, so you certainly can't go back. But what if you're just 1 amma outside of the Techum? Why not say, hey, let me walk my 4 amot that I'm entitled to, and whoops, once I crossed my 4 amot, now I'm back inside the 2,000 amot limit of the city, and let me walk back. This is a principle called havla'at tchumin, overlapping borders. Technically, my border overlaps with the border of the city. So I should be able to, again, walk those 4 amot and then walk back into the city. Says the Rambam, no. And the commentaries explain that this relies on a principle that we learned in chapter 12, which is that the idea that a person has 4 amot square around him is that he can only choose to walk 4 amot in one direction. We don't say you have 4 amot this way, 4 amot that way, 4 amot every way. It's a total of 4 amot that you can walk. So it says the Rambam, as the commentaries explain it, because you started your walk out of the city, so you kind of declared that the direction in which you're walking in is outward. So once you pass the Techum, even by 1 amma, the 4 amot that you have as your personal border can only continue to go further outward of the city. You can't change your mind now and go backward. Sheha-arba amot sheyesh lo, says that Rambam la'adam, the 4 amot that every person has as his personal border, tchilatan mimakom shehu omed bo, begin with the place which you're standing, and you can only continue 4 more amot. You can't go 4 each way. Lefichach, therefore, kevan sheyatza chutz mitchumo, ama o yater, once you left your border of the city, even 1 amma or more, yeshev bimkomo, you have to sit in your place. Ve'ein lo lehalech ela betoch 4 amot me'amidat raglav v'lachutz. There's the operative word. You can only walk the 4 ammas from where your feet are standing and outward. Because again, by walking outward, you've declared that the direction you want to walk is further outward. So we're only going to give you license to walk 4 amot further, not to walk 4 amot backward. Had you had the license, let's just say theoretically, had you been able to walk backwards 4 amot, then you would actually be able to walk back to the entire city. Because by the time you walk your 4 amot, you're back in the Techum, you're back in the 2,000 amot, and you can walk back to the city. But the Rambam says that doesn't work. The same thing would apply to somebody who didn't leave the Techum. Shabbos came in on him. He was there Friday afternoon, 2001 amot outside the city, and boom, it gets dark. Afilu ama achat, harei lo yikanes la, you cannot go in. Ela mehalech mimakom shenichnas alav hashabbat, v'hu omed bo alpayim ama bilvad. You can only walk 2,000 amot from where you accept the Shabbos. V'im kal tamidato b'miktzat ha'ir. Okay, good for you. If your 2,000 amot finishes within a city, mehalech ad sof midato kemo she'amarnu, then you can continue walking just until the end of your 2,000 amot. Now, this line here is a little bit puzzling because we just said that you started off Shabbos outside of the Techum. That means you're past 2,000 amot from the city. How could you come back and have your 2,000 amot finish in the city? That doesn't make any sense. You're outside 2,000 amot from the city. So there are many explanations here. Some commentaries talk about that it's a different city. In other words, once you're outside of the Techum of your city, you go, okay, you know what, now I have 2,000 amot in any direction. Let me walk in that direction. And if you end up in a city in that direction, that's also fine, but you just have to go only until the end of your 2,000 amot. In either of the above cases, if on Shabbos you left the Techum, or on Friday Shabbos came in while you were outside of the Techum, but you had 1 foot in and 1 foot out, 1 foot in and 1 foot out in Jewish law is considered in. You can go back into the Techum. You can say, look at my foot, my 1 foot is in the Techum. I'm going to go after that foot and go back to the city. If somebody exited the Techum not by his consent. For example, non-Jews took him out forcibly, or a evil spirit, as the Talmud describes it, overcame him. He was possessed, and he walked out. Or inadvertently. It's also called shelo l'dato, because if you had been aware, you wouldn't want to do it. Ein lo ela 4 amot. Doesn't matter. You left the Techum, you can only walk in a square of 4 amot. Chazar l'dat. If you come back into the Techum purposely, ein lo ela 4 amot. You still don't get a license. You can only walk 4 amot. Hechaziruhu. But if the same people who took you out took you back in, the same goyim who took you out took you back in, ki'ilu lo yatsa, then it's as though you never left, because it's totally beyond your control. If the goyim took you and put you into another enclosed area, a private domain, if the goyim put you in a corral or in a pen or in a cave or in another city, you can walk the distance of the entire city. Unlike when we said earlier, when it comes to on your own, you weren't forced there, then you typically cannot walk the whole area. Here you could. Same thing if you went into one of these places inadvertently, not the goyim took you there, and you remember that while you were in there, it's okay, you can walk the entire distance of that new domain or the new city where you find yourself in now. But that's all if you leave the Techum without your consent. If you leave the Techum knowledgeably, on your own volition, you know what you're doing, even if you came back in inadvertently without your consent, you were possessed or the non-Jews took you back, since you left purposely, you're treated like that, and when you come back, you can only walk the distance of 4 amot, your personal border square. Same thing, if you walked outside the Techum with your own consent, even if you ended up in a private domain, can go in dir v'sahar, like a pen or a corral, you only have the 4 amot to walk, and that's it. If somebody takes a trip out to the Mediterranean Sea, as a matter of fact, to any sea, even though you find yourself, by virtue of the boat's trip, outside of the Techum of the area where you accepted the Shabbat, the boat becomes your private domain. You can walk the entire distance of the boat and you can carry on the entire boat. Let's return to the guy in Halacha Yud Bet who went out of the Techum not with his consent. And he was placed somewhere, whatever, and then he gets a partition around him. He can walk in that partition, the same way in Halacha Yud Bet. If he was taken to another private domain, he can walk the entirety of the private domain. Here too, if they put up a new partition for him, he could also walk in the entire area. Of course, it cannot be more than 2,000 amot, because that would be him leaving his own Techum. And here a leniency comes out. If he has a partition, he can walk the entire distance of the partition. If at one edge of the partition, he now finds himself within the original Techum that he left, since he's allowed to walk the entire distance of the partition, he can walk to the edge and end up back in his original Techum. Once he enters that area again, since he only came out without his consent, he'll be treated now as if he never left and go back to the city. We have to address a very human need here. Somebody who ends up in a situation where he can only move 4 amot on Shabbat. What should he do if he needs the bathroom? We give him permission to leave the 4 amot square, distance yourself, do what you have to do, relieve yourself, and come back to your place. And if it turns out that on your way to the bathroom, you ended up back in your original Techum, then sages said, okay, once you came in, we'll treat you as if you never left. But this rule is only if you didn't leave originally on purpose. But if you left on purpose, sages were a little bit more stringent here. Even if you came back in by virtue of the fact that you were going to the bathroom, we'll still give you permission to go to the bathroom. But no matter where you end up, you can only have the distance of 4 amot of your personal border because you violated Shabbos by leaving the Techum on purpose. Let's say somebody left the Techum of Shabbat, but it was with the permission of the high court. He went for a purpose. We're going to have later on in this book a whole section of laws called Kiddush HaChodesh. The way we established the Jewish calendar is used to be based on the testimony of 2 witnesses who would see the new moon at the beginning of the month. And for that mitzvah, we don't care about the Techum Shabbat. We say, if you saw the new moon, walk to the high court no matter how far it is. So this guy walks with the permission of Beit Din. Witnesses who come testify that they saw the moon. Or anybody like them who's allowed to leave the Techum for a mitzvah. Whatever city, whatever place, let's call it first before a city, whatever place he gets to for his mitzvah deed, from there he has another 2,000 amot. The Talmud tells us this was a enactment made by Rabbi Gamliel, because he saw that people stopped coming. If you don't let them walk around, they say it's not worth to come. So he said, no, once they come, it's okay. Since they came for a mitzvah, they have another 2,000 amot. If the place he had to go to was a city, we treat him like a member of the city. And he can walk the entire distance of the city, plus 2,000 amot outside of the city. Let's say you walked out of the Techum with permission. You had a valid reason to help the high court, to do a mitzvah. And while he's on the road, they tell him, hey, the mitzvah which you're trying to do was already done. We already have witnesses who came to Jerusalem and saw the new moon. Go home. The halacha is, it doesn't matter. You left for a mitzvah. Wherever you are now, you have another 2,000 amot. And if within your 2,000 amot that are granted to you from now, you would end up back within the Techum of your original city, you can go back all the way to your original place, and it's as though you never left. And any time a person goes to save a Jewish life, whether it's from the hands of idol-worshipping Gentiles, or from a raging river, or from an avalanche, wherever they ended up saving people, they have 2,000 amot to walk from there. But if at that point the government was run by idol-worshipping Gentiles. And the Jews were afraid to spend the rest of Shabbos in the place where they saved Jews and only be limited to a 2,000 amma square from there. They wanted to go back home because they were worried about the Goyim. The sages said, go back home to your place carrying your weapons, no problem. Because that's the only way we can ensure that Jews will continue to go save their brothers. If the rabbis would say, hey, drop your weapons and go back home, they're going to be very vulnerable and they wouldn't want to do it. So the sages said over here, because you went out to save Jewish souls for pikuach nefesh, you can go back to your place carrying your weapons as well.